Hello, and thank you for joining us for the WWO webinar on positive youth development. Today, we are honored to have our expert, Dr. Kristin Anderson Moore. She is a social psychologist with over 40 years of experience, and she is currently working at Child Trends, and she's monitoring the impact of positive youth development on children and families. We also have Melissa Middow, the Chief Program Officer at WWO. Thank you for joining us, Melissa. We can't wait to hear your insight on this program. And Thuy Ngo, the Country Director of WWO Vietnam and an internal consultant for the organization. Thank you for joining us, Thuy. Your input will be vital as you talk about the children and youth in Vietnam that we assist with our positive youth development programs. Thank you all for joining me. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Thuy. Dr. Moore, I'd like to talk to you about the impact and what you've seen over your 40 years in the role of researcher and evaluator of positive youth development and other programs that touch children and families. I'd love to hear what you have seen over these years as a researcher in this methodology and this approach to youth development.
Great. Thank you for inviting me to participate. And I will say that for many years, Child Trends was focused on monitoring the trends, the well-being of America's children, and finding lots of room for improvement. But the programs that people were coming up with were negative. They were punishment-oriented, discipline-oriented, and they were striving to eradicate problems. And I think gradually people in different places came to realize that that wasn't a strong approach, that we needed to focus on positive outcomes, and we needed more positive approaches. And that's really what positive youth development is. It's two things. It's positive outcomes. So we don't want just zero. We don't want to just prevent all the bad things. We want to support and build and foster good things. And then there are approaches that help to make that happen, positive relationships and supportive kinds of relationships. So I think that there's become quite a consensus that this is the way to not only prevent problems, but to support good desired development.
Excellent. Well, I know that you are preaching to the choir. We are all believers in what you just said. And Thuy, I'd love to hear how you have used this type of positive youth programming to help the youth evolve into happier, productive young people. Please let us know how you've done this in Vietnam with our youth.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Dr. Moore or Chris. May I address you like this? So thank you for saying what we think and believe, because positive development is something that we try to follow for the past 10 years. And by saying so, we want to focus on the potential and not the problems, as you just mentioned. Because the youth that we have been serving, they live in extreme adversity, but we never want to mention their stories because they want to say, call me by name and not refer to me as a story. And we want to say that nothing about them is without them. So that's why we try to see them liberating themselves from their own pressure, from the peer pressure and from the family pressure, if they still have a family, and society pressure, so that they can strive and thrive as the person that they are meant to be. So in the past 10 years, we have been serving about 10,000 youth in such conditions. And I must say that they don't have the starting point like their peers in society have. But we try to look at them as a whole child, as their needs, as a perfect human being. with a lot of potential there, and what they need is an enabling environment to help them through the development journey. And by saying so, I would like to mention a concept in your research study that I just read, which is a life course, because I would like to address the needs of not only individuals, but also a generation.
Thank you. Thank you, Tree. It makes me want to go and be part of your course, because what you do and how you see the youth is so beautiful and individual with every single youth that your team serves. It is how we all want to be seen. And I think the common thread is that what you said, every single youth wants to be looked at as an individual and as a human being. And that's how we need to interact with everyone in our lives, but in particular, children who have lived lives that have a fair amount of adversity. So thank you, Twee. Melissa, could you give us some insight as we look at our other programs in Haiti and in Ethiopia? Could you tell us a little bit about our youth development programs there as well?
Thank you, Claudia. Happy to be with you all today. As Twee mentioned, across all of our countries, we focus on positive outcomes, positive approaches to working with youth. In Haiti, we have created an internship program for young people, bringing them from living kind of unengaged lives in the community, having dropped out of school, not having jobs, not being able to productively engage with their peers, with their community. We created this internship to provide a positive pathway for them, giving them opportunity to have training on how to work with children, and then also build teamwork and leadership skills. They get to go into preschools, orphanages, community centers, and be the ones to deliver this programming for young children. And the impact we've seen has been incredible, because they go from having nothing to do all day long to suddenly having purpose, having ambition, having dreams, talking to each other. They walk through the community and everyone is greeting them by name. So they went from nobody knowing who they are to suddenly being role models in their community. And it just creates a spark of life that is phenomenal. So I really appreciate Dr. Moore's explanation that instead of just focusing on the negative, when we can really highlight the positive and even bring it to our youth attention, that they do have incredible skills to give, and it really transforms a generation, as Twee said.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks so much. I love that story of going from almost being invisible to being a leader, and how they make that transition so beautifully, because it's so positive and it's easy to go towards the positive. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. One of the things that WWO does is our camp program, and we do that in collaboration with Serious Fun Children's Network. And we work with children very much using the positive youth development modality. I'd like to talk a little bit about how camps and how they work with youth in this residential setting generally, to impart the positive youth lessons and approach, and how the camp programs have kind of influenced how we see positive youth development in all of our work, or in all of your work, Dr. Moore and Twee and Melissa. I'd love to hear how anyone who would like to chime in to talk about the impact that youth programs have made on positive youth development, the positive youth development approach. Dr. Moore, if you'd like to jump in, and then we'll bounce back and forth. Thank you.
I'll start the conversation. I think one of the important things about positive youth development is that it's a set of principles. It's not a set of rules. And that means it can be used in a variety of settings. It can be used in different countries, as you've shown. It can be used for people of different ages, including not just children. So using principles that are appropriate to the setting, a camp is a very different place for kids who are maybe 11 to 14 versus a training program for young adults. But the same principles hold. And so I'm eager to hear how you implement it in a camp setting.
Twee, you have two types of camp, so I think I'd love to hear your insight, and then Melissa will take us to Haiti and Ethiopia with the camps that we have there. Could you jump in, Twee, for us?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think you all can see how happy I look when we talk about camp, because it brings joy to all of us, and it is life-changing for everyone who ever participated at camp. So we serve two populations. The first population is children living with HIV. So I mean they are infected perinatally. And later on, we serve the campers living with cancer, and we hold them very tight in our heart, because we can see all the changes that we can bring in. And I would like to say more about principles, because for us at camp, we rather call it the core values of camp, that is love, respect, and safety. So by bringing them to camp, we provide them with a safe environment, with a lot of mutual respect, and of course, love. So we need to, it is like executive functioning. So maybe they have lived a life without knowing about rules or principles. So when they come to camp, they spend the whole day following a routine that observe the three core values of camp. And then they learn that they have peers everywhere. They are not alone with fighting with their own battle. And then they also learn life skills. They also learn how to communicate, how to become resilient, and how to expand their social network and the network of support. So in a row of 3 years, we have conducted our outcomes evaluation for camp, and the result was so remarkable. So the campers come back home and make friends and build up a network of support that increased to 300%. And they also became very proactive to engage in social event. So I mean, now they know that they are not alone and they are not that weak, and they learn how to adhere to the treatment because they know that they have a future. And many of them come back to serve as an LIT, a leader in training. And later on, they became CIT, counselor in training. And many of them drop whatever they do when summer camp comes so that they can go back to camp and serve. So I mean, camp changes not only the life of campers, but also for us, camp makers, and also anyone who believe in love, respect, and safety for children and youth.
So as you put it, it gets under your skin. Once you experience these beautiful core values, you want to re-experience it as much as you can. Thank you so much, Twee, for letting us hear that story of real positive impact on these youth as they go into these residential camps, and the follow-up programs that you do so beautifully.
Yes, sure.
Melissa, could you talk to us a little bit about the camps that we have in Haiti and in Ethiopia?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I want to jump off of what Twee said and focus for a minute on labels, because I think camp programming has a lot of impact in that area. often our children and youth become known with negative labels, especially when they are living with an illness. They're known as the sick one, the one who goes to the hospital. They have HIV or they have cancer, and suddenly that becomes the way they view themselves through often negative labels. And what we do at camp across our countries is to take these negative labels that children see themselves with and change them to positive labels, finding positive ways to identify ourselves, talk about ourselves and our friends. And so a week at camp can transform the way each individual child sees themselves. They're able to find their own strengths. They're able to identify the strengths of those around them. And so I think that's an impact you can't see in a 2-hour program every week, or seeing kids for a couple hours every day. When you have them really for 4 and 5 days at a time for a residential camp, when they're getting to eat together, sleep together, well, sleep in the same buildings together, it can kind of reinvigorate, and you start to see huge leaps and bounds and changes, positive changes. So it's an approach we deliberately take in each of our countries, in Ethiopia, in Haiti, in Vietnam, is to really identify what are those negative labels that we that have stuck to us, and how do we find the positive.
Thank you. Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Melissa. Twee, you touched on executive functioning and the role it has in successful positive youth development. And it was mentioned in one of the articles that I read that adverse childhood experiences can negatively affect executive functioning. And many of our children have grown through so many adverse childhood experiences. How does the positive youth development approach bode for our children who have lived through so many adverse childhood experiences? Can we touch on that? Whomever wants to jump in.
Sure.
Dr. Moore.
I'd like to just start that conversation in the sense that there is a lot of focus on brain development, and certainly being in extremely negative circumstances can affect brain development, the architecture of the brain for young children, but it is malleable. That is kind of the part of resilience, but it does take a positive and ongoing kind of stimulation and support and experiences and relationships to help recover. But that's the meaning of resilience, and the life course approach and the positive approach can do that. And that I'm hearing that in these conversations. This is a really important strategy for children and youth who have experienced various types of adversity.
Yeah.
Thank you. Twee?
Thank you, yeah, Dr. Moore. I appreciate it so much because it took me to the future skills model that is a triangle of skills. So usually when we talk about personal development, we would focus on academic achievements, which is true. If they need a decent job, they need to have a decent skill. But it is not enough, especially when a child is growing up from a condition that does not allow them to learn more about non-academic skills, like how to communicate in society, how to express yourself, how to not be self-discriminated, for example. And it is why we try to help our youth learn their executive functioning, like, for example, very simple, the 5S in the Kaizen model. So they know how to organize their own life, beginning from their own bedroom to the workplace that they are going to enter into. And then they will have to learn about uh, organization culture or corporate culture. So they know what is appropriate language and interaction. And also they need to know all about the labor code, for example, to know their rights as well as um, uh, their responsibilities, for example. So they have to build a new routine for their new life, and that is to enter into a new story. So we need them to be strong, and that's why we also try to provide them with psychosocial intervention so that they can enter into group therapy or individual therapy, or everything they do will have a therapeutic uh, uh, property built in, so that they are grown out of their own trauma. And because they are the only person who can bring them out of their recurring nightmare, and not us. And
You
we,
mentioned, yeah, you
yeah,
mentioned earlier the whole child model, and I was so pleased to hear that because that is so true, and it's based in research that if your health is poor, you can't succeed academically. You know, if you're emotionally distraught, your health is going to be impaired. You know, if you're not doing well in school, you might engage in risk taking. It's really important to recognize that people are whole people, and so I'm glad to hear that.
thank you, Dr. Moore. Actually, when we look at a child, we started with a newborn uh, 12 years ago. And then before we know it, they would grow into an adolescent and into a young adult. And what should we do? We cannot just say, hold on, uh, we can only help you as much. So we cannot segment a child into sections. And we say that now I give you 1,000 US dollar a year, and you have to promise me that you don't drop out. So it doesn't work like this. So we have to support them in every way we can by basing on their needs. So every child that joins our program will have their own IDP. So the individual developmental, and we have to help them realize their own plan. We don't do that for them. They are the author of their own plan. So the only thing that we try to do is to empower them and to make them more resilient. And even for psychological support, we need to help them. So when they are alone, because we are not accessible 24/7. So if they suddenly feel distressed or stressed or even depressed in the middle of the night, what should they do? So we have to teach them to use some techniques when they are alone, like the butterfly technique, so they can embrace themselves and calm themselves down, or the EMDR technique. So anything that help them uh, making peace with themselves. And also mindfulness is also one of the tools that we use very often, because it can be practiced anywhere, anytime.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Twee. Melissa, would you like to take us across the world and talk to us about how this is done in Haiti and Ethiopia?
Yeah, actually, I wonder, I'd like to tell a story for a minute because I think it connects what you both were saying, Dr. Moore and Twee. We had a young man in our program in Haiti. I'll call him Paul. He was young and vibrant. His family lived in the center of town. He had a younger sister. He joined the internship program probably when he was about 17. He dropped out of school. didn't have anything to do. So he wandered in one day and asked if he could join. And so we started working with him and training him. And boy, the kids just loved him. He had such a zest for life. And when you talk about a whole child and the way things are interconnected, his mom got sick and passed away quite suddenly. And he went from, tenuously holding on to everything around him to losing his mother. And his mother's family came and took the home away from his family. So now suddenly they've lost their mom and they're homeless. And he still tried to come to programs, and we tried to find ways to support him. And you just saw him start to spiral. He suddenly couldn't find that guiding light that had him going. His health started failing. He started interacting with negative influences. And it happens so often in our programs that we work with children and youth who live quite fragile lives. One small incident can suddenly unravel everything for them. And it was so hard. I remember we'd have team meetings and talk about him and say, what can we do? How can we help? But the life course kept going, and we lost track of him for a few years. But I only tell the story now also because it's a positive ending. He ended up marrying, and he's got 2 young children, and those children are now in our programs. And they're receiving all of the benefits of early childhood development programs, quality care, all of that. The years of speaking positively into his life have come back for him, and he's come back around, and he's made friends again with people. He's made amends with the community, and I think we talk, and we always want positive outcomes for our youth, and sometimes it just takes a bit longer. But I think if we can look at the whole child and walk with these youth, these children across years, we do start to see that generational impact of one person who started with us to now his wife and children getting to have that same experience. So it just kind of came to my mind when I was listening to Dr. Moore and Sweet Talk.
Thank you. I was so fearful that something was going to happen. Because the truth is, as much as we want to save every single child in our program, sometimes we can't. And how can you not have just a broken heart hearing a story that doesn't end well, knowing that there are stories that can't end well? And there's a beautiful story like the one that you just shared. Thank you so much, Melissa. I'd like to talk about whatever subject we haven't touched upon today, because I know that with 3 or 4 questions, we have not scratched the surface of the impact and the findings around the positive youth development approach. And I'd love to start with Dr. Moore, because I know that you are right on the edge with evaluating new programs and monitoring best practices. And we want to learn from you, because we always want to deliver the best, most impactful programs. And we have this amazing source of information with us today. So could you give us more information about what's happening right now in the field? Because we want to learn from you.
Well, one of the things that's exciting to me is that I see smart people working in the real world who have come up with this strategy based on their own insight. And then we as researchers have laboriously come up with a similar set of principles. And that's extremely gratifying. And I think where we are now is we have a pretty good sense of what they are, and we need to be intentional. We don't want to just assume that, they'll get it. So understanding what the principles are, knowing that they're principles and how they're implemented will vary across age and place and time. But getting a logic model, really, what is it that this program is trying to do, and what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? And obviously, those will be probably whole child outcomes. But they're different for like a summer camp sports program than they are for an after-school academic assistance program. versus something that's a full-time residential program. So what is it you're trying to accomplish? And I think the distinction between what we call confirmatory outcomes, what are the things that you really are committed to achieving, and then the ones that you desire, you hope you're achieving. So I think aspirational is what we call those. And I think kind of getting intentional, really thinking about as a program, as an intervention, because of course, one of the things you want to do is report back to your funders. Report to the political leaders in your community. You need to be able to show that this really important approach meets their goals as well.
Very important. Thank you so much. And I think as we move forward, and I know in the past we have done this as well, but I know that Twee and I know that Melissa, we're all committed to building in this intentionality into the programs as we go forward. As we develop new programs, that needs to be in there. And when Twee mentioned her future skills program, I know she built in the intention into the program. Twee, could you just touch on some of the things that you made sure were built into that future skills program before you put your first youth into that program?
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more from you, Dr. Moore, because what we need is to put a name on our practice. So we have done a lot, but it is like on instinct, so to speak. So we love to see the name to the practice that we have been using. And that is why we are very keen on monitoring and evaluation. And we try to build a logical framework for each of the programs we implement, so that we know all the indicators. And I appreciate so much a term that I learned from reading your research paper about multi-variables and multi-variate. So that is what we always try to do. And every staff member in our team is an M&E officer. So we build everything based on need, and we try to follow an evidence-based approach, so that we are responsible and accountable to our donors, our funders, and also the community that we serve. Because, we need to share the outcomes of our work with the stakeholders, and first of all, with our clients. So the clients are entitled to know what is their starting point and how far and how do they how they have to do to reach a goal in their IDP. So every stakeholder in our program needs to be informed about the pace, about the path, and the destination of the journey. So we try to do psychological assessment. For example, we use a SIBA for externalizing and internalizing issues. And then we have the CSI, or we want to see it as a whole child that covers the 6 domains of life of a child. And we also try to measure pre-test, post-test after the life skill session. And we also just introduce something like emotional recognition. So you measure the difference between the pre and the post.
You're saying something that's very important, which is you're engaging the young people in the record keeping. They're not just recipients, but they're really engaged in making and evaluating the program. And we went through a stage where administrative data, just checkbox. How many did you serve? How many did you serve? How many did you serve? And we're looking at outcomes, and you're asking the young people themselves whether or not their subjective well-being is better.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And they have the right to know about their well-being. But most importantly, we want to build up an enabling environment because we want our program to be sustainable. We don't want to be there forever. So we build up a good environment, and then we phase out there so that we can go to the next community. So we don't do the job for the community, but we try to raise awareness and then to raise their responsibilities, and they have their pride when they see the outcomes of their mutual work with us. So that is the best reward that we ever had in our program.
Yes, and I think what you also touched upon is the respect needs to permeate into all stakeholders. The respect that we give the funders, the respect that we give the youth in the program. It's about transparency and honesty, admitting when the path didn't go perfectly well and recognizing when it did and trying to replicate that. And how you speak about the youth in the program, they need to know the path, they need to know their responsibilities, and they need to take ownership of the success of that path, which is a very adult and empowering step in their lives. That was so powerful what you just told us. And I think that respect does permeate the way that we need to speak to everyone that's associated, every stakeholder that's associated with WWO in our programs is very important. And I know that you do that, Twee. So thank you so much for bringing that up. That's so important. I don't want to leave anyone out. Melissa, would you like to add anything else to this conversation? We kind of missed you on this round, and I never want to miss your insight into any of these.
No, I think, I mean, you all said it. There's not a lot more to say. I think when we have the opportunity to measure what we're doing, it leads to success upon success. We see, like you said, Claudia, where we've missed the boat, where we need to get back in line. We get feedback from all of our stakeholders, from the youth maybe in the program to their parents, their teachers, the community. And so it's a bit of a 360 check on how we're doing. I think the one thing that I see that we can always do better in is capturing those unintended nuggets of amazingness, which become kind of your impact stories, because you go along and you have this, here's the goal, sorry, I'm holding my cord in my hand. Here's where we're wanting to go toward, and we're taking those steps, and then suddenly we see all of the beauty that got connected from doing this thing, and that's can be challenging to measure, to capture, to share back to the community, back to the individual, back to the donor, and so these kind of conversations always spark that reminder that to find ways to measure what we're doing, and then also see the big picture as well. Step back and look at that kind of all the little pieces. Yeah, so that's it.
And that's really why this is what we love so much about what we do, right? It's the nuggets. It's not counting heads and counting how many programs were delivered. It's beautiful nuggets of impact. I cannot thank you enough, all of you, Dr. Moore, Twee, Melissa, thank you all for joining us. It has been so enlightening for me personally, but I loved how all three perspectives kind of blended so wonderfully in supporting this conversation and talking about this very important topic. So thank you very much. I hope to speak to you again very soon, Dr. Moore. We all are part of your universe in every way we can. We're so grateful to you, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us on this webinar for WWO's Positive Youth Development Programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.